Welcome to Always Ageless, the show where we celebrate timeless living, real conversations, and the inspiring people who prove that life doesn't have an expiration date. It only gets better. I'm your host, Valerie Van de Zilver, and today's guest is someone whose story will truly touch your heart. Jami Shapiro is a powerhouse of purpose. She's the founder of Silver Lining Transitions, the creator of Magical Moves, a decluttering expert, podcast host of Grandma Has ADHD, and a certified senior advisor, which I'm working on becoming. And I can tell you, if she is a CSA, that is really an accomplishment. She's also a member of the National Association of Senior Move Managers. But more than titles, Jami is a woman who's turned her own life challenges, a cancer diagnosis, a divorce, an ADHD revelation, into a mission to serve others with empathy, compassion, and action. And she is a world of resources. Her team, easily spotted in my cheerful, bright orange aprons, which I love, helps seniors and families through some of life's most emotional transitions, whether it's a move, a downsizing, a reclaiming order in chaos. Jami's work is a reminder that healing and hope often begins with a small, thoughtful act of service. Today, she joins us for a heartfelt conversation about second chances, self-discovery, advocacy, and creating impact at any stage of life. So grab a cup of tea, and if you're driving, roll up your windows and turn up the volume, and join us for a very special episode of Always Ageless, from her heart to yours. Welcome, Jami Shapiro.
Wow, thank you, Valerie. That was quite an introduction. It sounds a lot, wow, when you hear it from someone else. But I love what you're doing, and thank you for having me.
I've been following you for a while. You're in Carlsbad, California. So for our viewers and listeners, she's not far from us. We're in Orange County. She's in North San Diego County. And I followed her from afar. And the first time I saw her team in bright orange aprons, I thought, I'm going to love this lady. And finally, we connected with another group of senior advocates and senior home coaches. And now we're finally together here on Always Ageless. Jami, you have such a story, and I'm so honored to have you on our show, and you're such an example for everyone to follow. But let's go back to the pivotal moment in your life in your early 30s.
Okay.
Cancer diagnosis. How did it reshape your life?
Oh, okay. So at the time I was 34, I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and we found a lump in my neck. I had to wait 10 days for pathology. And, when somebody goes through something like that, it's definitely a wake-up call. It is am I living the life that I want to live? Because I think, finally you understand, like I have an expiration date, right? I am not going to be here forever. And life takes on a new meaning when you have faced, your mortality, because I was very lucky that the diagnosis was thyroid cancer. I had to wait 10 days to find out that it was a very treatable cancer. And then I had to go through a year of scans when they found spots in my lungs to see if it had spread. So, and again, young children, I'm a young mom, and it was life-changing.
I'm sure it must have been very scary.
It really was. And that was actually the impetus for naming my company Silver Linings Transitions, because had I not gone through that cancer diagnosis, I probably wouldn't have slowed down enough to really reflect and determine if I was on the path that I wanted to be on.
And that's really a pretty young age for that kind of cancer, isn't it?
No, actually, it's the most common age. It most often affects women between the ages of 25 and 45. So I was right in the middle. It's a very treatable cancer if it's the kind that I had. There are different types, and I just had a very treatable kind.
Well, that's good, and we're glad that it turned out that way. And
Me
that
too.
was one of my questions: was how did your experience with cancer evolve into the inspiration for senior living transitions, senior linings, excuse me.
Silver linings. So I actually was a realtor. that was what I was doing. And I think it just wasn't the career for me. And that was that opportunity for me to examine that. Realtors work really hard, and a lot of people don't appreciate them, and it can really take a toll on work-life balance when people don't respect boundaries. And so that's a whole other conversation. And
Yes, it is.
um, so I actually ended up going to so back up. I was actually working at a cancer foundation. I was their director of communications and marketing. I had moved from Florida to California. At that point, I now had three children. So this was 7 or 8 years post cancer at this point. And I had a friend, and she had found out a friend of hers was selling um, on eBay for seniors. So they were, going into seniors' homes and selling the items that they didn't want. And through building that, we discovered NASM, which is the National Association of Senior Move Managers.
Right.
But I do want to share it. When I joined, it was NASM, NASMM, National Association of Senior Move Managers, but they have since added and specialty to the title because we were getting phone calls from people who were not seniors. They would start the phone call with, "I'm not 65, but I saw what you did for my neighbor." So I
Oh,
jokingly say we don't discriminate based on age, and it can be any situation.
right.
So I went to the conference. It happened to be in San Diego, and it was that aha moment, like, oh, this is work. They actually said that realtors make really good move managers because there's a lot of overlap. You're helping families through difficult situations. I was doing a lot of the move management piece, as a realtor, so it just was a
True.
natural progression.
Yep. Yeah, and I understand that. I have a transaction right now where it happens to be a senior and doing all the work with helping her pack and decide where to go and how to do it. And actually, she'd probably be better served by having you help her. So
We go to Orange County, and I want to tell you, I'm a very big believer in serendipity. And it turns out that literally while I was waiting for pathology to come back and the doctor was calling, I was actually representing a client, and she was buying a condominium of a woman who was moving into a senior community. And there was an issue with a chandelier and it not being moved in time. And I remember my client who was had no patience for the seller. And I was not a move manager at the time, right? But I'm like literally facing cancer, and she's making a big deal out of a lamp and the timing of getting it out. And I was just like, have some compassion. So you know what? I find it very, like I said, synchronistic that I remember that deal. I remember where I was sitting when that all, and I yelled at my client. I was like, I can, and I didn't even have the understanding that I have now.
yeah, and certainly working with seniors gives you a whole different perspective
Yes,
on
absolutely.
life and patience and compassion, that's for sure. Now, I think about that same time your marriage ended, is that true?
No, no, that was a couple years before my marriage ended. My marriage, okay, so this was all happening while I was working as a realtor and still going through the cancer thing. And then we moved to California from Florida. And a couple years after that happened, I discovered NASM. And then right after officially launching Silver Linings Transitions, my marriage ended. So I was literally building the business and going through a divorce simultaneously.
And how did that influence your mission?
So interestingly, what I recognized when I was getting back into the workforce was that there were a lot of women, and I'm going to say women because it tends to affect women, but not to say that it's only women. But if somebody alters their career to be home with their children or to care for aging loved ones, and they have a gap in their resume, and then they want to go back into the workforce, or maybe they have responsibilities for carpool, it can be very difficult. There are a lot of employers who do not honor that life experience and also the responsibilities that we have outside of life. And so that really shaped my desire to both honor the transition, but also the people that were working for the company that might also be going through a transition.
Yes, and we've also learned the impact on employment that caring for older people has also, and that's another subject we can talk
Yes,
about. I
it
think
is.
there's a lot to be discussed there. So
Sure.
when was a moment that you felt like you had this strong calling that this is what I was meant to do?
I would say that I had that strong calling when I went to the NASM conference. I was like, wow, I loved the people. I loved the energy. It felt like I was going to be able to give back. And I also can't talk about that without mentioning my grandparents. I was an only grandchild, and
Oh,
I had only one set of grandparents. My father's parents died before I was born. And so I had a very, very close relationship with my grandparents. And my grandmother had such a sense of humor. And I remember growing up, she had a pin board in her, it was like a front of the body and the back of a body, like a bulletin board with little red pins. And she jokingly said, "We're not going to talk about what hurts. We're just going to put a pin in it."
uh,
Um, and she was just funny. And, she was just, you know, timeless. She just was just fun and wise, and I didn't notice her age. And I'm very fortunate that my grandmother, died with her full faculties, um,
uh,
and never, lost her memory.
yeah, that is great. And did she live close to you?
Yes, she did. She was actually in the delivery room when I had my first child.
Oh, so but that was in Florida, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then did she come to California with you?
No, unfortunately, she died 3 months after my first child was born.
Um,
It was, yeah, that it was I don't want to get down that path because
no,
yeah,
very
it was
sad. I'm
sudden
sorry
and
for
it
that.
was
Yeah.
an yeah. So
And so how the name Senior Lining transitions?
silver linings.
Silver line. I'm going to get this right
Yeah,
before
that's
they
okay.
show it.
It's silver linings
Transition.
transitions. Well, if you think of silver lining, it's, when a bad thing happens, when, comes out of sorry, when a good thing happens, comes out of something that was bad, right? And I was literally trying to think of a name for the business, and it came to me. I'm very spiritual, and it was really a divinely inspired name.
And a great one because you're always trying to put the silver lining on on the transition or the situation, whatever it is, right?
Right. And you know what? I will also say that, a lot of times a senior, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty, which no one likes.
Yeah.
And I try to remind them that, let's look for the good. And the good is that, you survived whatever life threw at you. I lost one of my closest friends at 40 to ovarian cancer,
Oh gosh.
around the time that I was going through my own cancer. So I still to this day will think, wouldn't Robin like to be going through this? So even for a senior, I think it's really important that we look for the positives. And I definitely want to share some of the work that I've done as a result of getting my CSA and how it ties into my podcast.
So, but we know that your business goes beyond logistics. You help people through deeply emotional and personal life challenges. What's your philosophy beyond that, behind that? I mean, how do you handle those things?
Well, as I was saying, I really try to focus on, what is positive in this situation. But I will say that when I got my certified senior advisor designation, you have to read, as you now know, 6 books. And one of the books talked about really the sociology of aging. And there was a term called gerotranscendence, which have you heard of that term yet?
Yes, I've gotten there, yes.
I loved that concept. And basically what it was, and I've heard two different people who've come up with it, but I like Eric Erickson, and that was the one that they mentioned in the book. He said that, he was a sociologist who had the 8 stages of development, and that when he and his wife got into their 80s, they started to, evaluate their life. They started to talk to their contemporaries, and he developed the 9th stage, called gerotranscendence, as a result of his experience, which is really a time of reflection. And, looking back on my life, am I happy with the choices that I've made? Am I happy with my relationships? Am I at peace? Am I at peace with my death? And, what I will say is that for going further than senior move management, which in itself is a very fulfilling career to be part of someone's journey when they are going from a home that they've lived in for many years to a community, and knowing that you are making that an easier process is fulfilling. But when I put the two together, that ADHD is highly heritable and it doesn't go away with age and it doesn't stop when you're in your 40s or 50s, but it grows with you. And then I actually I became an ADHD coach
Oh,
because, yeah, so I'm in the process of finalizing my last class. Um, but when you have ADHD, you have this voice in your head that is constantly, for many people, criticizing, or why did I do that? Or why can't I get it together?
yeah.
And to me, healing that voice and giving somebody an explanation, that there was nothing wrong with you. You were wired differently. So yes, you were cluttered, and yes, you probably were disorganized, but how creative were you? And how, let's focus on what you could do. And then that really, really ties back to what the work we do is silver linings transitions. It's not enough to get somebody organized. Anybody can do that, but it's to understand how you can be and stay organized, and what you need to do to kind of hack your brain and your system.
Yes, and I certainly want to get to that. But with the silver lining transitions, what other resources do you have and do you do?
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so as I shared, I do work. I maintained my real estate license, so
Uh,
I will refer clients to an appropriate realtor, and I interview them, and I get a sense for what's going to be the right match for them, and then through the referral fee that I get, I'm able to offset Silver Linings Transition Services. So
okay.
that's one thing that I do, and that's why we met on the Senior Home Coach program.
Mhm.
And then Silver Linings Transitions, we do move management. So that is moving somebody from a home that they've been in to a senior community. It could be moving across the country to be near children. It could be going to a smaller, easier to maintain home. Maybe they're in 2 stories, they need to go into one. So all of that. And then we also handle all of the logistics. So we'll do the packing, the unpacking, we do a space plan. So somebody has a realistic idea of what's going to fit and also safely fit, because
Right.
we also don't want there to be tripping hazards. We don't want, we want to really take into account safety. And then we help handle all of the things that they are not taking with them, which a lot of times is the hardest thing for our clients to understand is, you know, I paid a lot of money for this, or my family doesn't want it. And now we have to help them, let go of those things and try to find the best outcome. So we do the move management, we do home organizing and decluttering, which is a natural partner to move management. And then we also do paperwork and photo organizing. So it's a lot.
That is a lot. That
Hmm.
is a lot. Does anyone ever bring you on just for paperwork and photo organizing?
Yes, yes, we do. And we have different people on our team who have different skill sets. Like for instance, you're never going to bring me in to organize because, like, back to that ADHD brain, my brain doesn't work that way. But I can motivate you. We can talk about why you're holding on to something, but I am not going to be the person that's going to be able to help you, like, put it together.
That's interesting. Last weekend, Jamie, I was at a senior expo here
Uh-huh.
in Orange County. And it was interesting that of all the things I had on my table, the one thing that people commented on, they all said, "Oh, I had a flyer about downsizing and decluttering." Everybody said, "Oh, that's what I need help with. That's what I need help with." They didn't need to move, but they certainly needed to declutter.
Right. And you know what? One of the things that I've discovered with the ADHD is, we all have a different clutter story.
Yeah.
Some people are children of the depression. I think we're seeing less and less, but they, grew up in a very different time where, you had to reuse, repurpose, recycle because they had that scarcity. And then, you have this silent generation that were definitely impacted, as were the boomers, by parents like that.
Yes.
And then you come into, if somebody has ADHD, maybe the reason for clutter is that they think they're going to use it again one day, or they went out and bought all these art projects and they thought, oh, I'm going to do this craft. And then they lose interest and they move on to the next thing. And then also, because we tend to forget what we don't see, a lot of people with ADHD will stack things up because if out of sight, out of mind. Then you
Right.
have hoarding disorder, which is its own category, and I'm really not going to cover that. But
No, that's okay.
Yeah. And then you have people who, think it's a value. And one of the things that I always like to do now, keeping in mind I do the majority of my presentations in San Diego.
Yes.
When I do, I call it my talk, do you own your stuff or does your stuff own you? And I asked everybody if they were going to leave San Diego next week and they were going to leave behind everything they didn't want. How many of them had a family member that would want their stuff? And I say, please raise your hand really high so everybody can see it. And then everybody laughs because no one's raised their hand.
Right. No one wants their stuff.
And so I think that when you understand that it's not unique to you, it's, and then I talk about how we are living differently. Just like, for instance, I'm sure you grew up having a really nice dinner around a dining room table, and there was a china hutch, and there were like really nice chinas and crystals and souvenirs, and maybe a wedding cake topper or some anniversary gift, right? We don't do that anymore.
No,
Right.
no, we don't. We don't. And one of the things I saw that you do is help people assess their options. And that must be a deeply personal thing. There's so many things that they can do. Like you said, they can either just stay where they are. We talk about aging in place,
Mhm.
right? And they just feel the need to declutter. They've just got so many things. They don't want to move, but they would be willing, okay, maybe I'll clean up a little bit, but don't make me move, right?
Right. Well, I want to say two things to that. First of all, crisis doesn't make an appointment. And I think that
Oh, what
everybody,
a great phrase. Let's remember that.
okay,
Yeah,
everybody should have a plan B for when it doesn't go exactly the way you think it's going to.
right.
That's number one. And then the second thing, and I will do is I'll share a personal story if I can with
Please do,
you.
absolutely.
So my grandmother, as I shared, passed away unexpectedly. It was a medical mistake, I'll just say that. And so we were not prepared for her to pass. It just was not expected. And my mother was grieving the loss of my grandmother and was really not prepared to let go of my grandmother's things. Because, and that's, I've actually heard the term grief hoarding. That sometimes we will bring those things in because we're not ready to say goodbye. I will also tell you that my grandmother had not designated her desires, which is a huge mistake. And there was a lamp that I talk about in my presentation that she'd promised me from the time I was 4 years old when we went to pick it out together that one day that was going to be my lamp. Well, she had to
Oh,
give my mom or my uncle that, and they gave it to one of their cousins.
oh,
I got it back. I got it back, but we shouldn't have even had to go through that. And when a family is grieving, the last thing they need to be doing is fighting over belongings. There's so much emotion caught up in that. So with my mom, because I'm her only child and she is actually living in a senior community in Florida with a lot of stuff because my mom is actually the original grandma behind the Grandma Has ADHD.
oh.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that story too. I said, and you were worried we couldn't fill all the time. I said, Mom, I need you to sort of let me know what's here because when you pass, I can't take it all, right? And I'm not going to know what's significant. I'm not going to know what's valuable. I'm not going to know what's so important that I need to keep. I said, so I'd like you to do what we call Swedish death cleaning, which is it's a great, you can look this one up. It's
Mhm.
basically proactively going through your home as if you had passed. And I always ask the audience, how many of you have ever had to, clear a loved one's home? Did you like that? And, no one likes it.
No.
So I'll give you one that you won't find online, part of the Swedish death cleaning. I call it a tequila box. So I always ask the
And
audience,
what is a tequila box,
are you
Jamie?
ready? Okay, so you got to answer, you got to play along with me, Valerie.
Okay, all right. Okay.
If you put some things in a box that maybe when you pass, you don't necessarily want someone to read or open or see, and you put them in a box that said, do not open. Do you think you have somebody? I see the smile on your face. Do you think you have someone that would open that box?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay, there you go. You put a bottle of tequila in the box with a note that said, I did ask you not to open this, but if you're going to, I hope you'll have some fun.
Oh, great. What a great box. Yeah, it's a
Hmm.
great idea.
Yeah,
That's a fun thing for your workshops too, right?
sure. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So tell me about, let's talk about our listeners and our viewers. They're all excited about, your podcast. Tell us about how that came to be.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. So, I want to say this about ADHD, and I don't know if you know this, Valerie, but when you have ADHD, you tend to have something that like really excites you. And like I always equate it to that little boy who knows every single dinosaur and when it walked and what it could do. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So my super interest is happens to be ADHD. So you just asked me a hot button topic.
Great.
Um,
Good. Well, let's talk about it.
so this is what happened. I'll give you the timeline. I started Silver Linings Transitions. My marriage ends, and shortly thereafter, my child, who is, I'm going to tell you, is non-binary because this kind of relates to the story. So I will refer to my child now, Will, but at the time was a girl, middle school, and came to me and said, I think I have ADHD. And I said, you don't have ADHD. You've been reading since you were 3. Because in my mind, ADHD was my hyperactive little brother who had to be put on Ritalin to stay in the
Oh,
classroom. Because everybody knows the ADHD boy. We all know the kid that's out of control. And that is what we think of when we think of ADHD.
it is.
I could not learn to read until second grade because I couldn't sit still to read. I was never diagnosed with ADHD. So, how could this child that's been reading since 3 possibly have ADHD? So, anyway, the psychiatrist is asking, and this is really important when someone is evaluated for ADHD. Our memories are not always really good. So, it's really helpful to have another person there who can answer those questions on your behalf. And
Okay.
answering the questions for Will, and I looked at the doctor and I said, I'm answering more yeses for me. Do I have ADHD? And he said, absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
So, and that's by the way, there are women who are being diagnosed. There are 2 times that they're discovering it. One is when their child is diagnosed, and the other is, and I'm talking middle aged, and the other is when perimenopause starts because estrogen is pro-cognitive. And when we start to lose our estrogen, we'll start to have those memory issues. And they're really more pronounced for women with ADHD. Now there are so many other ways of going backwards, but so anyway, I'll keep going with the story. So at the time, I am starting a business, raising 3 children, going through a divorce. So ADHD goes on the back burner. I don't even like get into that. I'm just like, oh, I have ADHD. And then I move on. And then with Silver Linings Transitions, as a move management company, we have a slow season because we sort of follow the real estate cycle. And
Really?
yes. And so I had a mentor who suggested, you really need to join NAPO, which is the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals, so that
Yeah.
when you're not doing moves, you can be doing organizing. So I got my NAPO certification, and then I discovered the ICD, which is the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. And I earned my level 2 specialists in ADHD. So basically helping people with ADHD be organized because that was an interest of mine. And as I was learning more and more about ADHD, I was like, it was like getting a playbook to my life. And then I was listening to a podcast and they said something about fibromyalgia and migraine headaches being very common in women who had ADHD. Now, I don't have either of those, but my mom had both. And
Whoa.
my mom had always struggled with clutter. And I called, and I used to, when I would do a presentation, I would jokingly tell the audience, I come from a family with hoarding disorder. Because if you had looked at my mom's home, she had stacks of stuff everywhere, all over the furniture. Now we weren't going to be on the TV show of hoarders, wasn't that bad. But I would jokingly say, my mom has hoarding disorder. Well, then I called her and I said, Mom, I have some good news for you. I don't think you have hoarding disorder. I think you have ADHD. Listen to this podcast. So sure enough, my mom, who's been treated for anxiety and depression her entire life, goes to her psychiatrist and her therapist and says, my daughter thinks I have ADHD. And you know what? She did.
She did.
She did. And then I had to go back to all of these clients when I would walk into their home and say, don't worry about your clutter. This is what my mom looks like. I was like, ding, ding, ding. All these people that I've seen all these years have had ADHD. Why would I think that it didn't even dawn on me that I had to keep looking backwards, right? Like it wasn't just my child and me. We have to keep going back.
So, but did your grandma?
My grandmother did not, but I think my grandfather did. And I think that my maternal grandmother, my father's mother, just based on what I know about her now, she was an entrepreneur. A lot of entrepreneurs and realtors, we think outside the box.
Yes.
We don't think linearly. We don't like to do repetitive, stupid things.
No.
We're very creative. I
Yep.
call it's like having MacGyver. You
Yep.
just like, how can I come up with a solution? We're good at multitasking. Not that anybody should multitask. But
Well,
I was looking at my grandmother, like
but
what I
see, some
know.
of us think that that's fun and exciting, right?
Well, we need that, right? That's
Yeah.
that's that whole, we need that dopamine. We need that
Yep.
constant stimulation. Give us something that we love to do and we can hyper focus on it to the everything else falls away,
Yep.
which is also part of the problem is that people think if they can super focus, if they can hyper focus, they must not have ADHD because that's attention deficit. Well, it's actually,
Right.
we have not gotten the word out correctly. It is not a deficit of attention. Your attention goes where your interest lies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. That's true. So your grandma didn't, though.
Well, actually, technically, my father's mother, I'm pretty sure did. But I didn't know her. She died before I was born. But just based on the stories that I've heard about her, I guess I could say, yeah, she was probably my grandma that had ADHD. But I jokingly say my mom is the OG grandma. And, back to divine inspiration,
Yeah.
I recognize the connection. I wasn't thinking I'm going to do a podcast. I wasn't thinking about any of that. And then literally, Grandma Has ADHD came to me, and I'm like, oh, I've got to do this.
So what inspired you? What was the inspiration for your podcast? At what point did you say, I need to do this?
Well, like I said, I had really been absorbing a lot about ADHD and its impact on my life and my child's life. And then I started to recognize how ADHD had impacted my mom and our relationship all these years. And then I started to realize, I love seniors. I think again, my grandmother was just an amazing person and definitely my role model for, how I want to become a senior. I'm 55, just to give you my age. I'm not there yet. Um, and I'm just like, I want to bring this information to this generation of people who have known that something was off about them, but they didn't know why it was off because it has changed my life understanding my ADHD and it's changed my relationship with my mother. I have a lot more patience for her. And so that was the impetus.
So uh, um, what about someone who's listening or viewing and saying, that sounds like me? Or I wonder if I have ADHD because I can't pay attention. I'm off here and there. You're kind of like I am,
Right.
what should I do? How do I know if that's me?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I will say that a lot of symptoms of ADHD mimic typical cognitive decline that occurs with just regular aging. And one of the things that I learned, through the CSA, the Certified Senior Advisor training, is that seniors can do the exact same thing that somebody younger can do. It just takes longer. Well,
Okay.
that's going to be the same thing for someone with ADHD. We can usually accomplish the same thing, but we may need accommodations. And this is what I'm going to say that when you think of universal design, right? Like
Right. Mhm.
universal design, whether you're in a wheelchair or not, it's never going to hurt you to have universal design.
No.
So my feeling is if whether and with ADHD, you can't just look at where you are in this moment in time. You have to look backwards. And they say generally you want to look at how you were at the age of 40. Like that seems to be the age that we want to look back and see, are these behaviors new behaviors that may be, related to aging? Or are these behaviors that have always been there, but maybe they're exacerbated by aging? So back to the universal design. If you think you have ADHD, the likelihood is if you're listening and you're a senior, you're probably not going to be a candidate for medication because, we're taking other things at this point and we don't want to bring in a medication. But that's not to say we can't bring in tools that make
Okay.
I call it a scaffolding
All
and
right.
understanding.
So one would think that because the name of your podcast is Grandma Has ADHD, that would be focused on that. But is that your focus? Do you focus on seniors? Do you inspire other families and families with children and people that are younger
Yes.
to recognize this? Is it a disorder, Jamie? Is that what we call it?
I'm not calling it a disorder. I mean, yes, they label it a disorder, but I
Yes.
don't, that's one of the things that I'm trying to do is reduce the stigma. And Ned Hallowell, who's probably one of my idols in the ADHD space, said that it should be renamed vast variable attention stimulus trait. We should get rid of the word disorder. So part of my why is reducing the stigma of ADHD and really any mental health condition that somebody has. We need to, we really need to destigmatize. But the show is really geared to, this is sort of my audience, it's people 50 and over, because actually the age of 50 is the average age that someone would become a grandparent. But really, when it comes to ADHD research, they kind of stop looking at age 50. So it's either people who are 50 and over, or it's family members who are now looking at the relationships that they've had with their family and realizing that they, like in my situation, there was a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I am now realizing that, ADHD can be generational trauma. And if you were raised by somebody who lacked, the capacities or emotional dysreg, a lot of ADHD, there's a lot of emotional dysregulation, rejection sensitivity. So that's going to have an impact as someone raises their children. So it's meant to be for the family, for the person that's 50 and over. You don't have to be a grandmother, you don't have to be a woman, you don't even have to be 50 and over. But I will say there's a lot of content out there for adults who are not seniors and, and parenting ADHD.
It seems to me that and I think you've talked about this and certainly is your mission, it seems to me that part of the importance of this is for people who are younger to recognize this in their aging parents and kind of just say, yeah, of course,
Right.
that's what is the problem here, right? And
Right.
then actually working with them, and as I know you are in your podcast and with your business, is working with them to say, okay, like they're aging, but they also have this. Like for me, I know I'm a challenge to my family. I'm sure that you have your times when your family
Right.
says, "Mom, stop," or whatever.
Right.
So it seems to me that that must be. I mean, how many? So I think about Jamie, that when my son was in high school, he had a friend who they diagnosed him with ADHD and gave him, Ritalin and all this stuff. And actually, now I think about that. Now we're realizing that there's other ways to handle it. Maybe that's not always the best way. And along with helping seniors age and the other things that they go through is to recognize and say, okay, right, you've had this. This is something you've had to deal with, and now we're going to love you and we're going to have fun with it. And
Yeah, so actually that's two of the big reasons for my advocacy. One is I love the quote that Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, that basically that they said that Ginger Rogers had to do everything that Fred Astaire had to do, only she had to do it backwards and in heels. And that's sort of what I think of ADHD. Like we live in a world that was not built for the wiring of our brains. And we're in this industrial society that's conformity. And, you're going to sit in the classroom and you're going to memorize facts. Well, that doesn't work for our ADHD brains, number one. So it's no wonder that a lot of people with ADHD, like my mom didn't finish college, although she's brilliant. It just, that environment didn't work for her. So part of it is just explaining to somebody who's evaluating their lives, like, this was what you had to deal with. And so pat yourself on the back for, getting through what you had to. But also, one of the biggest things that I am really advocating for is I've had people say to me, well, they're a senior. Why does it matter? Why does it matter?
oh,
Right. And then I said, you know what?
they're not dead. They're just a
That's
different age.
right. I'm like,
It's a
so
different age.
you're telling me that when you're 50, 60, 70 years old, you don't want to keep growing or learning about yourself and you should just stop, like we're just done. And then I want to also say this, people with ADHD, we are naturally curious. We want to continue learning. We have something we can contribute. And so a big part of, I'm at this really sweet spot in my age. I'm at 55 where, I'm not really being looked at anymore, right? I'm sort of being dismissed in our society. I'm the ma'am that, people don't look at, right? but I'm also not a senior yet. So
Right, right.
I'm, you
Well,
know,
I'll take that place for you. Yeah, I am.
right. But, so I know how I'm going to feel when I'm a senior and I want to be counted. And I'm sure I'm going to be that very dynamic senior that is having all the parties in the senior community and, making things happen.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I hope you are. And you might want to read the book if you haven't. Have you read the book Stage Not Age?
No,
I'll
I
send it to you. Great book. So my question to you is, which I think you've just answered, do you believe that our understanding of ADHD in aging populations is evolving and still has a long way to go? Because it seems to me you think of, I mean, my frame of reference always is ADHD in children, right? We need to stop it then. We need to give them Ritalin because they have it, but we just don't think about it. Somehow we think that once people have grown up, they've outgrown it, kind of.
Yes, so we don't outgrow it, it morphs. And it's so funny. I was at the International ADHD conference last year, and I was promoting my Grandma Has ADHD podcast to all of the people that were there. And somebody says, "You mean we're not going to outgrow it like they all said we're going to?" Right? And I will tell you that Kathleen Nadeau, she has written, as at this moment, the only book that exists on the intersection of ADHD. At least it was the only book that existed last year when I went online. She actually agreed to do my podcast before it had even launched because she said that it was so hard to get the book published because it was back to why does it matter? So, I mean, I think our society in general, we've got to really change the way we view aging. I hate the word anti-aging. It drives me crazy. Like there's something wrong with aging. No, if you're lucky, you get to age, and we need to figure
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
yeah, we
yeah,
need to figure out
absolutely.
a way
Absolutely.
to honor our seniors and our elderly. I just finished the book, The Anxious Generation. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So it was basically talking about why the anxiety levels in our kids are so high and what contributed. And of course, the natural is social media. But there were other things that have sort of happened. And I was a latchkey kid, and most generations of people want to do things differently than our parents. And so what my generation did is we coddled our children and we took away their opportunity to make choices and, and live through the consequence of their choices. But the other thing that we've done is we don't honor our elderly. We don't give them the role in our society the wisdom. And I mean, I see that with my children. They don't think I know what I'm talking about. It's so, yeah.
Well, and you and I know from all the groups that we're in that there is so much that we should be doing with older people, bringing them back in as teachers and mentors. And it annoys me no end when I go so many places and people say, "How old are you?"
Oh, geez.
And they say, "How old do you think I am?"
Hmm.
And, I get everything from 85 to,
Oh, do you know what? So I'm very short, and I would have people come
so
up to
I am 5 feet tall. Yeah.
Okay, so am I. And people would
Yeah.
come up to me all the time and ask how tall I was, and I'd be like, not very. So you should just be very. When they ask you how old you are, just be very.
Yeah, or not very. So you got the idea for your podcast.
Yes.
And I know it's hugely popular. What's the response been? And are your listeners people who are, I'm sure you have listeners from all over the country, all over the world.
Yes. The coolest thing, I was actually taking the CSA class to take the exam, and there was a woman who had read about my podcast in an article that I had contributed to, I think it was Attention or one of the ADHD magazines, and had read about it. So I will say this, it's catching on, it's slow because a lot of people, again, don't even realize that there's an intersection of seniors with ADHD. So that's one of the reasons that I am saying yes whenever someone will let me talk about it. But I will say that I have had such an amazing response from professionals in the ADHD space who are like, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking this on. And again, if it's 5 to 10% of the population, we don't know exactly the impact that ADHD has because 80% of people who have it don't realize they have it. But I will tell you, I have had people come up to me after I've given a presentation and say, "You spoke to my soul," or "Thank you for giving this, thank you for explaining this." I was just away this past week and I participated on a show called The Blocks for entrepreneurs. And there was a woman there, the neurodiverse educator, I think, and she ended up doing a little talk. And a lot of people who went to the talk went into the talk not realizing that they had ADHD. And they think, again, 50% of entrepreneurs, so,
Oh,
probably easily the majority of the people that were participating who were entrepreneurs. And you could see the tears that were coming when people were just finally getting this understanding of who they are and why they've been this way. And like I said, when I found out about my own ADHD and started learning, I felt like I had gotten a playbook to my life. And then when I meet someone with ADHD, we have an instant connection with each other. We just understand each other. Like we go right for like, I don't do small talk. It bores me. But I will have a significant conversation with you that will impact both of us.
yeah, yeah. And for me, it's like, watching this, and when I saw your first podcast, I said, all right, like, it's okay. I'm okay,
Yes.
right? I'm all right.
You're more than okay. And I mean, I
And
like,
have fun. I get to have fun because
yeah,
it's okay. I don't have to be medicated, right?
no. In fact, they're saying the more people embrace it, the better they're going to do. The better they're going to do with aging. And it's just like, here I am.
So
You know,
what do you think we should be doing with aging and people with ADHD? Should we have classes? Should we be, what should we do? What about if you're a person, if, we know there's so many people like us, so should we have classes? Should we have craft classes? Should we do something that we just celebrate this in people and give them the opportunity to come and be together?
find your tribe. That's definitely in the works. All of the things that I am envisioning for what I'm going to create. But in the meantime, if you find your tribe, if you find other people who have ADHD, and you can, we call it masking in the ADHD space, when you're just like holding it together, keeping it together, and then you can just like come in and let it all go. Finding people that you can just let it all go with. It just is so much. I mean, look how much I'm enjoying this conversation with you. I don't
Yeah.
have to pretend. I'm like, here, I had an issue with my dog. I'm talking like I don't have to be anybody but who I am, because
Right.
I've come in under that lens of I have ADHD, and I'm not ashamed of it. I was born with it. I didn't cause it, you know.
So for our viewers and listeners are saying, okay, maybe I have it. So what are the symptoms? How would someone know if they have it or not?
Okay. So we tend to think very well on our feet in a crisis situation. If something interests us, we're able to laser focus on it. If it doesn't interest us, then it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get motivated. There's a sparkle about us. We do not like to be bored. Our brains are actually deficient in dopamine, so sometimes we will create chaos for ourselves because we need a higher level. Um, a lot of people struggle with what's called time blindness. And I want to say this, if you meet one person with ADHD, you meet one person with ADHD. So, and, if you hear some of this, it's not all going to apply. I'm pretty good about my time. I'm usually on time for things, but we don't always judge how much time something takes for us to accomplish. Um, and let me think. So, maybe we forget to pay bills. I call it the ADHD tax. I'm constantly doing something and then forgetting that I had to do it, or not completing all of the steps. My brain, I call it popcorn brain. It's just always firing. I have a hard time bringing it in. We ruminate a lot. So, like, here's an example. I was pumping gas. I was leaving Kansas and I had to put gas in the rental car. And all of a sudden, I'm standing there and I see this water leaking from this big pipe. And I think, oh, maybe that pipe is going to crash on me. Like I start going, that's where the anxiety comes from. So we tend to catastrophize situations. So those are some pretty big. And then there can be a lot of dysregulation in families, a lot of maybe not harmony, because a lot of us have what's called rejection sensitivity. So we will overreact to things, or like I'll get a phone call from somebody and they'll say, I need to talk to you. And immediately I go to it's something negative. I never think it's positive. And we tend to really grab onto the negative. Does any of this sound familiar to you, Valerie?
Very familiar. Very familiar. Absolutely. I'm going to play this back for my husband. My
Okay.
son already has
Yeah.
accused me of it a long time ago. He
And
just thinks I'm a lost cause.
And I will put that out there too. Like if you have a family member who has ADHD, and you think that some of this applies, it's highly, highly heritable. So the likelihood is that you do. The Grandma Has ADHD website has resources on it. I'm in the process of putting together a quiz that people can take. That should be out
Great
in a
idea.
week or
Great
so.
idea.
Yeah, and then I've got a Facebook community, Grandma Has ADHD, and then anybody that's in the listening area of Orange County, San Diego, Silver Linings Transitions can go in and do the organizing, and I actually provide ADHD coaching.
Oh, interesting. Well,
Hmm.
this show actually, our station is based in Beaumont, out in that area on the way to Palm Springs.
Okay.
So that's where we're based, but of course, we're all over Orange County, Southern California, but also now because we're going to have this on YouTube, anybody can contact you. So let's be sure that we take these last few minutes, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, if they want ADHD coaching, I am absolutely able to do that virtually or by phone. And that is grandmahasadhd@gmail.com. You can find more information about ADHD at the grandmahasadhd.com. And then if you're looking for organizing, paperwork, photos, home, storage units that need to be gone through, that's Silver Linings with an S, transitions with an S.com.
All of those places. And you can go anywhere in Southern California.
We can.
That's
Yes.
great.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been impressed also that you've developed a team of ladies, that you've given them an opportunity to be in your business and find a place for them to express themselves and be valuable also.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually decided to make, as many employees as we could support full time, because I think the last thing that somebody needs to be worrying about is how they're going to make ends meet or pay their bills. And I think that they're better employees when they are they're salaried. Unfortunately, I'm not big enough to do that for everybody. That would be a goal of mine. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am with Silver Linings Transitions if I didn't have the amazing team that I have. And shout out to them. And Dawn, my manager especially, has been with me for 9 years, and she's like my work wife and keeps me sane.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's quite an accomplishment. And that's quite a statement for you that someone has been with you for a long time. Because anytime we have employees that are loyal to us and stay with us a long time, ADHD or not, that's quite a statement.
Yeah.
What's the silver lining you found in your own story that you want every listener to remember? And we have about 1 minute left.
I think we always have a choice of how we react to something. And I don't want to be a victim. And so if I can have something come out of my experience that makes it better for somebody else, then to me, then that is worth living and worth, growing and worth helping other people. I just don't keep it in, I guess I would just say whatever your experience has been, just as use it to help somebody else. Or think of helping, what would your old self needed from you, and do that.
That's a great lesson for everyone to hear and listen. So all of our listeners and viewers, I know, have gotten a lot out of this episode. It's going to be great. I'm sure it'll be played a lot and replayed, and many of us are going to take it home and tell our spouses, that's me, listen to it. That's what I'm about. It's been an incredible conversation. Jami Shapiro reminds us that sometimes the most powerful transitions happen when life throws us off course, from fighting cancer to founding multiple businesses, advocating for women and seniors, embracing her own ADHD diagnosis with courage and with candor. Jami's journey is nothing short of inspiring. If you or someone you know is facing a transition, whether it's moving, decluttering, just needing support, or you'd like to know more if maybe ADHD is a factor in your life, you can find out more about Jami's work. We're going to put it on the bottom of our program, where we're going to intersperse some shots for your website in our video. And be sure that you reach out to her. As always, we would love to have you come back to Always Ageless with Valerie V next Monday at 3 o'clock for resources, connections, or just a listening ear. We're here for you, and we do respond to all of our emails and requests. If you know anyone who's done something incredible in their later years, we'd love to feature them as a guest on our show. Until next time, stay strong and curious, and remember, you're not aging, you're just evolving. This is Valerie V, and we'll see you next week on Always Ageless.